Good morning, good afternoon, good day, and good evening. I don't know what time of day it is for you, but for me, it's a good time of day. We are back at it again today, and I wanted to make sure, I know I had a bunch of appointments this morning. I know that you guys are used to getting this early in the morning before you're heading on off, but I had to get in when I fit in on this one today. Been pretty busy this morning, but I didn't want to leave you guys in the lurch. I said we're going to cover and we're going to talk about Black history, and Black history isn't just a month. Black history is every day, because Black history is history. Regardless of whatever you're told, I say our history is important. The things that we've done in this nation is important, and the impact that we have is important. So we're going to hop right into it. I don't want to keep you guys waiting too long, so we're going to go on the other side. But before we do, I'm going to ask you guys, give me that YouTube thing. You know, give me a like, give me a comment, give me a subscribe. Let's see if we can get this thing moving. Let's get this inertia going. And I'm glad to be here with you today. So check my audio levels so we don't have that same mistake that we had the other day, to make sure that, yeah, we have volume, we have audio, we have voice, we have me talking to you, and you can hear me when I sit there and post this. So let's get after it right now. I really want to sit there and go into it. So on the other side, I'll see you. Share this out. We're getting after it. So we have two things today. Two things that I want to talk about, two aspects in life that happened today on the 15th of July, but in 2 different years that pertain to us in Black history. One is in Philadelphia. That's the first one. That's the 1822 date. And then the other one's going to be in Ohio. That's the 1970 date. That's closer to me. That's in my decade. So my wheelhouse, that's where that's going to be at. And I want to talk about both of them. And let's start with let's go all the way back, and let's start linearly. We'll start at the first one. What happened in 1822? What's significant about 1822 that we should definitely make sure that we keep our eye on and have an idea of what went on in 1822? Well, let's get to it. I'm just going to share my screen. We're going to sit there. We're going to talk about it. We're going to roll through these slides real fast, and we're going to see exactly what it is that happened in 1822 that we as Black people, as melanated people, as people in this nation, in this country coming up, happened that was significant for us. And it might not be your particular area, but it's always interesting to notice those originals, the first, right? That the classic, so to speak, the first time that something like this happened in a particular location.
Which is forced upon inferiors by superiors. Separation is done voluntarily by 2 equals. When you find an all-white school, they don't call it a segregated school, they call it a separate school. When you find an all-Negro school, they call it a segregated school, because it was set up by the white man. If it was an all-black school that had been set up by the black man himself, run by the black man himself, with the curricula that they follow, put in the school by the black man himself, they would call it a separate school. And it would be just as independent and on equal basis with the white school. But because the Negro schools in Harlem had been set up by the white man himself on an inferior basis with inferior teachers, In inferior
And there's a lot
buildings,
to
it's a
know with
segregated
it. So this
school.
is a
And
good
we don't go
first.
for
It's
any
also a
form
bad
of
first, but we'll get into the
segregation.
bad part about it because I like to cover the good, the bad, and the ugly when we have an event. So we don't just sit there and internalize the narrative that wants to get spit out towards us. So it was a segregated school, obviously, 1800s. This is before the civil rights. I'm sorry, the Civil War, civil rights, the Civil War moment that happened at that time. And what you had at this point, and what it talks about, is that there was an issue with a wave of black crime. There was a lot of crime at the time, but they were concerned with this wave of black crime because they started a white school in order to think they could mitigate crime at the time. And instead of mitigating all crime, what they had a wave of black crime that also happened during that time frame. And that was that when that Mary Street School opened up for boys, it wasn't for boys and girls. They opened up another one for young girls. That was another first that came later. We'll probably cover that. I'm not gonna say probably. We'll cover that on the date that it came because it came a few years. Couple years and on a different date than July 15th. So that was one of the things that was really significant in regard to the Mary Street School that happened at that time. And I'm always cognitive of what went on at that time with the school, because actually, you know what? Let me just read to you directly from what they stated about the school at the time, and that way you'll have an idea of what it was like then, why it was significant, and why it is I say it was both the good and the bad. So we have school. It's a public school. It's a free public school. It's there to educate the young people at the time, and that's something that I'm all about. I'm all about education. I'm all about informing people, making sure that you have knowledge. But let's look at some of the things that made this problematic, right? So let's just get into it, and I'm gonna read this directly. So it says. From the beginning, this is taken from William Dorsey's Philadelphia and Ours, on the past and future of the black community there. So that was the book that this came out of. It says from the beginning, the city's public colored school had lagged behind in every way. The first of them in 1822 had opened with a single teacher for the 199 students that were enrolled in varying levels of skill. So you had one teacher for almost 200 students, one shy of 200 black male students at that time. And they all were varying, so it wasn't just like one grade. I mean, it was a school open, it was a school with just one teacher. It says, as of 1856, so they're talking a few years later on when it started to build up, says the average teacher to pupil ratio at the best of them, meaning at the best public schools in Philadelphia at the time, the so-called Bird School on Lombard Street, so it was still a high rated school at the time, was still worse than 60 to 1. So by that time, from 22 to 56, from 1822 to 1856, you went from almost 200 students to 1 to 60 to 1 at that same school. And that was the best school for black young men at that time, public school that you can get, and that was still one teacher to over 60 students then. It said attendance, perhaps fortunately, was ragged, in part because the children were, throughout the 19th century, much truancy blamed on the shame and misery felt by black youngsters without proper or warm clothing. So they're dealing with being in this school that has a high student to teacher ratio, and they also don't have adequate clothing to go to school in. Philadelphia being on the East Coast, it's up there where it gets cold, and I can tell you I lived on the East Coast for about 5 years, and I do not miss the cold from that climate. But as it goes on, it talks about beyond the obvious problems caused by poor funding, a major issue was the lack of black teachers, as Philadelphians were convinced that the whites assigned to their schools, in other words, black Philadelphians, were the worst in the system. And with the notable exception of James M. Byrd, neglected and even despised their pupils. So they even hated the students that they had to teach. These white teachers hated the students they had to teach. Up to the Civil War, there were no blacks at all. So no black teachers up until the Civil War. In 1862, the year when the Emancipation Proclamation was drafted, the white directors of the district, which contained the little Banneker Color School, broke the line by hiring John Quincy Allen, a graduate of ICY. But when Jacob White left his own post in the legislature to take the job at Vox, the two men, in effect, simply switched, as Allen quit the public job to replace him. There was then still only one public school teacher as of 1864 when Pennsylvania's Afro-Americans formed an active branch of the new National Equal Rights League. The next year, hoping with wider opportunities with the end of the Civil War, and then it goes on to some other information there. So that was something that was extremely interesting to me in regards to the school there, that the teachers didn't even like the students there. They had a high student to teacher ratio. You didn't have black teachers in the school, and it really does remind me of something. You know what? Let me play something for you, because I'm sure that I'm not the only one that hears that and goes, oh, I know what this is. I've heard this before. And I don't want to just say sad, but it is something that when you hear it and you see exactly what's going on with it, for me, it bothers me. It bothers me immensely to hear the way that these young students were treated and how they were affected at the time. And let me see if I can get this audio up here for you. Let's see. There we go. We're going to come on in here, and I'm going to play this for you. And hopefully, you know what? I'm going to monitor the audio just to make sure that you guys are hearing exactly what it is that I'm hearing as well. So let's hop on in here. Let's take a look at this. Let's listen to this audio and hear what a brother had to say in regards to that, and why that's important to make sure that we have black teachers in there along with these students. It's a very important thing. Let's hear it. Let's see. So the audio should be playing for you, and it is not playing. I'm not sure what I just did. There we go. All right, so here we go.
Segregation, as we're taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, is that which is forced upon inferiors by superiors. Separation is done voluntarily by two equals. When you find an all-white school, they don't call it a segregated school. They call it a separate school. When you find an all-Negro school, they call it a segregated school, because it was set up by the white man. If it was an all-black school that had been set up by the black man himself, run by the black man himself, with the curricula that they follow, put in the school by the black man himself, they would call it a separate school. And it would be just as independent and on equal basis with the white school. But because the Negro schools in Harlem have been set up by the white man himself on an inferior basis with inferior teachers in inferior buildings, it's a segregated school. And we don't go for any form of segregation.
So there you have it. You heard, I'm fond of Malcolm. I like a lot of what he had to say. And give me one moment here. I apologize. Sometimes they'll sit there, they'll hit you up at a time. I thought I was done with it for the day. I wanted to make sure I could focus on you guys, and I apologize for having that interruption there. So in any event, so the brother Malcolm, he highlighted the issues of having a segregated school and not a separated school. If it were separated, then that means the quality of education would be equal across the board from what they were getting in the white neighborhoods or the white schools to what we would get in the black schools. And this obviously wasn't the case. Based off of what we read, based off of what we were looking at during that time frame, that's the issue that they had with having these separate schools. They had the good start with making sure they had a school, but they made sure they had a segregated school, an inferior school, a school where they had not enough teachers. The students weren't adequately equipped to learn because they didn't have the right clothing. And in addition to that, they had teachers that didn't want to be there, and teachers that just hated their students. So, or didn't like, despised. I equate despise with hate. So yeah, they hated their students. So you could see the whole course of what was going on at that time and how it is that all of these things came to a head at this school. And even decades later, they were still in the same position where they were at a 61 issue. So segregation at the time was still, even as was a horrible situation for the students, although they did get the ball rolling, and although public education in Philadelphia, some may argue, still is not that great. I'm not in Philly, but from what I hear from my friends who are, they say it's still not a great system there. So that's what you're dealing with there for that. However, we're not done yet. We're not done by a mile, Jose, because the other thing I want to cover is another first. And this first was in 1970. Again, that's my decade. That's my wheelhouse. That's when I came about. And this was James H. McGee. He was the very first black mayor of Dayton, Ohio. He was sworn in 1970 on today, July 15th. So this is where you have this brother, a very first black melanated brother, indigenous brother, whatever you want to say. This brother was the very first one who was sworn in on this day back in 1970. A day to be proud of. And he was viewed by many at the time as being somebody who was quite militant. But just letting you know, he was born in 1918, close to my grandfather's age, actually. Or no, well, my grandfather still hasn't beat by a little bit there. I say he went to Wilberforce University, served in the Army during World War II, and he got his law degree from what they call it, The Ohio State University, back in 1948. And he was considered a militant individual at the time, because he wanted to, what he said, bring the entire community together. But in doing so, in wanting to bring the entire community together, he was considered militant because they later called him moderate, but because he had taken cases with the NAACP, because he represented people who were downtrodden, he was an attorney, obviously graduating with a law degree from The Ohio State. They considered him extremely militant up until he came in there and he took office, and then they considered him a moderate at that point. And that was interesting. And he's, like I said, and here's some of his notable quotes that he had. I mentioned one of them earlier. Actually, let me go back and touch that again. He says that he was trying to pull the community together. And he was talking about the entire community. I'm more interested in pulling the black community together, and we can get the entire community together after we get ourselves straight first. But I say he was instrumental in doing that. And like I said, you look at what came out of Ohio, you can see, yeah, that was something that he was definitely very interested in. He had another quote. This one I'm put it in here because I want to juxtapose or put it against something else. I apologize for the big $2 word, but I was looking for the right word initially. But he wanted to put it against something else. He wanted to. I wanted to put this quote and the second quote that I have in here from him, and put it against something else that he stated. But he stated that work within the system, because with all its imperfection, I know of none better. And I point that out because just because you don't know of a better way, or you don't have a better system that you have as an example, doesn't mean that you ignore the issues. And working within the system is an option, but sometimes if the system's not working right, I think that it falls upon those who are trying to work within the system, and in that find themselves in the system with all the different inequities and all the different issues between the different communities and groups, to actually make sure that you put forth policies and things along those lines that benefit the group that's downtrodden, specifically black people. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about any other group besides black people. And he had another statement. He says, I say anything that hurts black people hurts white people too. So you do something that's going to hurt black people, it hurts white people too. We see that with the war on drugs. They were sit there down on black people. Now all of a sudden they got the opioid epidemic. And as a matter of fact, let you hear another quote that I want to put in here for you. Let me pull this up. and let you listen to this brother. I guess I'm on my Malcolm kick today.
I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted.
And yes. And,
what did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing. Climate of hate means that this is the result of something. And when I said chickens coming home to roost, I said the same thing.
But you did not say that you were glad the president was killed.
No, that's what the press said.
Yeah, so there you get it from Malcolm talking about the chickens coming home to roost, where it's something that causes it, right? He was talking about this culture of hate, this culture that is the racist white supremacy culture that we have in our society, in our country today. That was back then. That's why I recycle a lot of the wisdom that comes from our ancestors and our elders, because we sometimes think that what we're going through is new, that it has never been experienced by anybody else, and we're seeing it for the first time. So, and we, in the time that we live in, is vastly different than the time that they lived in. So they could not possibly have dealt with any of the type of issues that we're dealing with today, or the issues that we're confronted with today. This is not something that they possibly could have dealt with. However, when you begin to listen to it and you see the things that are going through, and you do the research to see what was going on back then, it's very poignant. It's relevant, right? From then even till today, the things that they're talking about, the solutions that they came up with, and the issues that they took note of at the time are still plaguing us today. You can drop that same information today, and it's still extremely relevant for those of us dealing with it today. And those are the two things I really want to cover today. Ironically, both of them had a Malcolm X quote. There was no Martin. There was no one of the other ones I love quoting is Geronimo Pratt from the Black Panther Party. He has several statements that I love quoting. But in looking at it, we have both the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we have a first in the fact that we had the first black male school that was opened in Philadelphia in 1822, and we had the very first black mayor who was sworn in 1970 on this date. And while there's some issues that I touched on, I didn't want to put too dark a cloud over it, but I want to make sure that when we talk about it, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the things that could have happened, or the things that we have that's going on, that we could actually make sure that we keep track of and keep in mind, so that as we're looking at it, even with that last quote, essentially that's a nice way of saying, at least for me, the chicken's coming home to roost. So if you do when white people are doing things and they think it's just going to affect us, at some point it's going to come back. That old adage that our elders taught us, or they at least talk to me about, in that what goes around comes around. That's where we're at right now. A lot of the things that they've done is starting to come back, and it's hitting them hard. They're looking at how their country is falling apart, even though we're the ones that built it. But we still have things that we can be proud of. We're looking at black mayors. We're looking at black schools. We're looking at the first for both of them in two different areas or two different parts of the country. One getting towards the Midwest, the other one on the eastern coast of the country. A lot to be proud of. A lot besides just entertainment and sports. And we can look at all the different things that we've done, all the different things that we as black people have contributed, and I think there's a lot to be proud of. And I want to make sure that I cover all of that. I want to make sure that as we go through, everybody understands exactly what it is that we have contributed and what it is that we can be proud of. But as you're looking at those two first, also remember what goes around comes around. So those chickens are going to come home to roost. And in looking at separation versus segregation, what you're actually looking for. We don't want the segregation. If we got to be segregated, we want to be separated. We don't want segregation. We want separation. And there's a difference. And he explained the difference based off of what he was taught from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And while I may not be Muslim and I grew up in a Christian, the sentiment is something I definitely agree with. And I think that that's something that if we're going to do the separation, that I say we don't want segregation. If they're going to continue to treat black people as second-class citizens, and they don't want to give black people reparations, give us our own land, allow us to sit there and do for ourselves without having to be harassed and constantly dogged by white people on a regular basis. We built the country for you. We've done a lot of work. You sat on our backs and rode us and took all of our IP and the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into building this place. And then you want to tell us, that's it, we don't need you anymore, and we don't even have a home to go home to. This is the home, and I'm not going anyplace else. And for you, and for those of you out there, I know I didn't tell you when we started, I love you. I'm hoping that you're having a great day. I'm gonna have to get back to some things because my day is going and it's great, but I definitely want to make sure I talk to you right now. And later on today, actually, I want to talk about something a little different. I want to talk about to our sisters. I want to talk about your beauty and something that I noted in listening to another sister on these YouTubes and something that she streamed, and I want to share that with you, and I want to share some insight that her little girl shared with her. And with that being said, I hope you're killing it, and I'm hoping that your day is outstanding, and may you always, always, always have peace in your life. And with that, I am out.